Okay, good morning. Thank you so much for having us here today. We're very excited to be here.
Yeah, very excited. Thanks, Greenville. How about that construction?
Yeah, so today represents for us a evolving relationship with your chapter. We've been able to speak at a couple different of the meetup dinners with you. And so we want to continue to build on that relationship, and today marks that opportunity. And so thank you again for having us. We want to start by asking a question. How many of you have been involved in a project that, for a number of reasons, it could be we committed to a design that ultimately didn't work, or we didn't have the level of stakeholder engagement that we needed, but for whatever reason, the project either struggled or failed? How many of you have experienced that? By show of hands. Oh, come on.
Be honest.
We know the number is bigger than that. Okay.
It's so common that even there's statistics that support how frequently it happens. So the Standish Group, it's starting to get echoey. The Standish Group did a study over a 4-year period and of 50,000 projects, and they found that 70% of those projects either failed or were challenged because they didn't meet either the time constraint, the scope constraint, or they were not within budget. And what that equates to is a big impact to our economy. So the Harvard Business Review has published statistics that have said that specifically IT failed projects will cost the economy upwards of $150 billion a year. Staggering number, right?
Yeah. We're not here to actually talk about failure, though. That's not the intent. But it is important to recognize some of the trends that we see, okay? And so that's what we're building a business on, is to help to correct some of that. And that's part of the purpose of being here today, is to help share some ideas with you. One more question for you, though, because we are an Agile organization. That's what we strive to do, and that's what we built our business to do. So how many of you have been involved in an initiative to either implement Agile in your organization or implement Agile within a project? How many of you have experienced that? Okay, fantastic. That's a good number.
Right, good. So we often find that organizations struggle when they try to implement Agile, or they adopt Agile, or when they find that they struggle with success in an Agile project. And the reason is because they still are working with that fixed time, fixed scope, fixed budget constraint.
Yeah. So when Joy and I look at an organization, and many of you may do this as well, we look at the organization as a system of delivery. It has all the people, processes, and tools required for that organization to produce something of value. But organizations of all kinds, they need to implement their own types of governance, their own types of risk and change management in order to support their project delivery and to support their brand, to support various things about their organization, and to protect it. And so what happens is the organizations, they evolve in such a way that their processes within the organization begin to mirror the methodology for delivery. So for example, if you look at an organization that delivers in a waterfall way, and you look at the governance of that organization, you would find, for example, that your PMO may be looking for a project charter. It may be looking for a set of BRDs or a set of FRDs, any number of, your project plan. It's looking for this because it's building the governance to support waterfall delivery.
Right. And so when teams or projects are meant to do an Agile delivery, we find that these existing governance processes become a little hard for the teams that are trying to work in an Agile way, because we often see that teams will break their work down to stories, if you're familiar with stories, but then we even know that they have to retrofit their stories back into some kind of a document to satisfy governance that's required by traditional PMO. And that puts us in an awkward situation a bit, and we're in a precarious Scrummerfall or Wagile environment after that. So what we would like to offer up are a few practices that you can help facilitate a more agile way of working that complement your existing waterfall practices.
Yeah. So if you were to begin following these types of practices, it would provide the value that comes from them without having to do deep change in the organization. So the good news is we're not recommending anything that we haven't tested ourselves. Dave mentioned that we both have an application development background, and so Joy and I had the good fortune, perhaps at times misfortune, not because of us, but because of the environment, of working together in an organization, mid-sized organization, about 500 or 600 people. It was in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where we both live today. And that organization was led by 4 entrepreneurs. So if you've ever had the opportunity to work for an entrepreneur, a true entrepreneur, you can relate to the challenges that come with supporting somebody who needs the ability to pivot, needs the ability to see their next great idea come to fruition. So do that in an environment with 4 entrepreneurs and just multiply the challenge times 4. So in that environment that we were in, and this was about 8 years ago, roughly, but we were there for 5 years working together. Again, we were hands-on system delivery at that point in time. But working in an environment like that we delivered in a waterfall way. It's okay, we did. We had, waterfall was the least of our problems per se. It was the supporting entrepreneurs who were continuously changing their mind on what they wanted, changing their mind about how much of something that they wanted. So we were very much stuck in a start, stop, start, pattern with the work that we had. So our environment, we would have a lot of half-done work, incomplete work that we're having to retool, retweak, and shifting priorities. So we were in an environment that was ripe for something agile to bring some relief, if you will, to what we were doing.
Right. So we partnered together to identify the right agile practices to put in to our system of delivery to help facilitate some of that change that was so readily happening. And so what we did was we just figured out which practices were the right thing for our environment. And we saw dramatic improvements. We saw dramatic improvements from a delivery standpoint, from a relationship between our business and our technology standpoint, team morale, and even innovation. And just to give you some idea of the extent of that, we went from producing our throughput, if you will, of projects from 16 a year to 64 a year with a small matrix team. So they were still matrixed across projects, but we were able to put in the right practices to help facilitate, 4 times the throughput. Additionally, this was amazing. When we first got there, it was amazing and startling, but it would take one test case or one tester 1 day to do 1 test case in that environment. So imagine the frustration of the business and how long it took to get something through the system, but the infrastructure wasn't really supporting anything faster than that. So as we started to implement these processes, or these practices, if you will, we saw increase in even that. So we went from 1 test case per day per tester to running hundreds and hundreds of test cases even per hour, if you will. So the benefits were far staggering, and far more beneficial, even beyond the delivery. So there was delivery and morale and team cohesion. And so now we're going to share those with you.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'll just add a few things because there's what the practices themselves began to enable a different way of looking at our work. Okay, so it enabled our business to be able to, instead of giving us a BRD that said, we want all of this on this date for this amount of money, figure it out, we would present them back with a different view of that work, and we would start asking very early on, kind of, how much of this do you really want now versus later, particularly to those entrepreneurs, because even though they would ask for a lot, in their mind they knew that there was some amount that they needed right away, right? But when we were in that waterfall way of working, it didn't enable. We didn't have the opportunity to give ourselves a way to rethink about that work. Okay, so that's what we want to present to you today is kind of what we could offer to you, something that you could start doing literally tomorrow when you go into your office. You could start thinking about taking some of these ideas and practices that we're going to share with you, and how would they fit into your work stream? You know, what could we leverage today? What could we leverage on the next project we start? Okay?
Okay. So today, these are the things that we're going to look at. We're going to start with a list of prioritized features, and then how to deliver those features incrementally, what we should do about goal setting. So we want to set 2-week goals, visualize our work with the board, task board, Kanban board, if you've heard of that, hold daily stand-up meetings so that we can come together and understand our progress towards those 2-week goals that we've set, present features to stakeholders when we've tested them, let the stakeholders see them, right? Hold a demonstration, let's look at it. And then hold retrospective meetings every 2 weeks. So did we meet our 2-week goal that we set? And if not, what can we do better in real time in order to meet those goals the next time?
Okay, good. So let's start with the idea of starting our initiative with a view of it as a prioritized list of features.
Right. So everybody is familiar with a BRD, right? They can be short or they can be very long. But what we want to offer here is this is our first time where we have an opportunity to take the work that the team or the development team and testers are going to work on and produce, and we want to put them in a feature list. So we can list them out, and then this is the first opportunity that we can actually get where we can start to prioritize those features, knowing that we still need to potentially deliver everything all at once, but what can we do to ensure that if tomorrow we want to pivot, have we done at least our highest priority piece of work?
That's right. So you can see this keeps you in compliance with the governance in your organization, if in fact the BRD is an artifact that they expect. It allows you to facilitate discussion with your business in a way that they are used to on the left with a BRD. But then as you move toward the right and you start looking at a prioritized list of features, this is what will enable you right from the beginning to have that discussion of what's most important. Like Joy said, what's most important? What's next most important? That will really position you for later on when we get it to the riskiest point of the project and we have to ask those questions anyway. We've now started to think about it and anticipate up front, and we've got the teams focused on that highest priority portion of the work first and foremost.
All right, so features, they are going to enable greater flexibility. So they allow for a more granular prioritization, meaning we all know we have to deliver something of, the complete size. But features, when we break those down, we can have a conversation about let's prioritize one bit over the next. All too often, we've experienced where when we have that conversation with business, they will say, yeah, this is our highest priority thing. And then when you start to get to the lower level, if you will, requirements or features, then maybe they'll be okay with not doing those. But it affords an opportunity for that conversation. They also help to identify minimum viable products, or those things that are the least amount of work that we can produce and potentially even do in a phased approach, giving to our customers or our stakeholders that provide us the biggest value. They can also be released incrementally, meaning to our customers, if that is an opportunity. Shifting priorities are easier to negotiate. So if business, or if you have an entrepreneur, if they decide that they want to shift priorities about the things that you're doing, you can do that with more flexibility, because now you don't have the giant piece of work in your system that you're working at all at once. They also help to enable flow more easily, meaning you can move features through the system of delivery faster. When you break down work and you have smaller pieces are just naturally easier to complete in a shorter amount of time. And work is easier to design, build, and test. It's far easier for those folks who are developing things and testing things to do those in little pieces. And then lastly, they increase the number of learning cycles. So if we take features and we complete them through design, development, and test, we have an opportunity to show those to our stakeholders. And at that time, that's a learning cycle. We're now in the check and the act, plan, do, check, and act, part of the PDCA cycle. So we're able to get feedback from them and adjust, in the case that the requirements that we've gathered aren't truly what our stakeholders want.
Yep.
That never happens, right?
So here's the trick. To do this successfully, you need to understand that there is an absolute right way to write features. So there's some guidelines we're going to offer to you. If this is something you think can benefit your project or your organization, this slide is the money slide. It's really important. As a longtime technologist, I was guilty of what I'm going to share with you for many years, and it wasn't until I started to adopt Agile and think about work differently that I saw how my mind worked and how I thought about work. And you can think about this and think about the conversations that you have about work and watch how people think, because we think very horizontal. Our mind almost mirrors the technology stack that we develop, meaning it would be common for you to take this information and go back and create a feature for the user interface, or a feature for the business logic, or a feature for the database work. Sometimes we'll do that to lend itself toward how our teams are even structured. However, if you do that and you think in a horizontal way across the technology stack, then what you do is you create dependencies across features that need to be managed and coordinated, and so you don't end up with a piece of work that can be demoed, if you will, and move through the system as one piece of work that you can then demo to your customers. So there's a right way to do it. So a good way to know how to write features is to know the who's the customer, the what action are they going to take, and then the why, what benefit is it that they expect. So your who, what, why, if you formulate your feature with that structure, you'll find that you will create a vertical sliced feature that will go across those layers, and then it becomes an independent piece of value, okay? A good way to start to move in this direction is to work with your business to discuss what outcomes are you trying to accomplish. So that's why a feature will include a benefit hypothesis and a measurable outcome. If you formulate it like that, then writing them becomes easier. It also lends itself for teams to be able to break that feature down, or to look at that feature to design it in a slightly different way, because they're considering all of the aspects of the feature. And so the other last important piece on this is to have a acceptance criteria. Ask your business partners or your stakeholders, how will we know when we're done with this feature? And whatever they say, copy it down, write it down, because that becomes what we would consider a definition of done, and it will further inform us about what it is we're trying to build, okay? So that's what we want to do from a feature list, why we want to start with the feature list, the kind of collaboration we could have around the work, and some of the guidelines for you to consider about that work.
Yeah.
Now we want to talk about delivering features incrementally. So smaller batches improve predictability and reduce batch size. Another way to look at this is if you look at the cone of uncertainty, if we start thinking in smaller durations and smaller time frames, we increase our predictability. This is why in Agile we have Scrum teams that literally do things in 2-week increments, because we know that our likelihood of being able to hit a target 2 weeks out is higher than our ability to hit a target that's, say, 12 months out. So this again, it remains in compliance with traditional waterfall governance. That's why it's important. But what it affords you is, and these increments can be whatever makes sense relative to the underlying work that's being done. But by doing this, we do put ourselves in a position to show the work to our stakeholders sooner, begin getting feedback. We also can put ourselves in a position to be able to release that work to production if we can do that. Sometimes you're going to have discussions where this is brand new to stakeholders, and they're going to be really in the mindset of, I gave you all the requirements, you have everything you need, that's what we're asking for. That's okay. Because you can then ask them, well, would you mind looking at some completed work along the way? And generally they're good with that. They get they get an incremental feedback loop. The other thing is we then build in some additional PDCA cycles for us to inform ourselves, as opposed to waiting all the way to the end of the project. Because when we wait to the end of the project to do a PDCA cycle, we've only given ourselves really one opportunity to ask all of the material questions that could have been asked along the way in a structured format. So this is incremental delivery.
Right. So just another story that comes from our entrepreneur experience. We actually, when we started to implement this incremental kind of delivery, we actually did take the opportunity to put it to production. So that's an option if you are set up to do that. But if not, then it's just an opportunity where you can see the little GIFs at the bottom that represents those packages that we can demo or that we can show our stakeholders. But in that particular environment, we got so good at this that we eventually outpaced our business, and our business couldn't bring us work fast enough. And when we would have the demo and we would show them the things that we were going to do, and they would say, oh, that release date we told you about, yeah, we can't do that now because we have to train our call center, we have to get our vendors on the same page, we have to do all of these things, we have to document from whatever governance like our marketing department had and so on. And so what we eventually ended up doing is we would still put it to production, but we would turn everything off. And the reason is because we were struggling with keeping separate branches for everything that they wanted to deliver and then, not deliver, and then deliver and then not deliver. So, trying to change the branching strategy and moving things in and out of where we plan to deploy was far too complex and so risky. So we just ended up putting those things into production, turned off. When they decided they wanted to go, we flipped the switch, did a quick test, and we were done.
That's right. So some of the benefits you can expect from incremental delivery is generating a working increment of the project more quickly. Each increment can be tracked as a milestone, so you can build your roadmap or your project plan with these increments built in. So it's easier for teams to design, build, and test a smaller piece of functionality or a smaller increment, as opposed to thinking of all of the design for the entirety of say, a 12-month project, or all of the development related to a 12-month project. Now you can actually just design a little bit, or you can have all of your requirements. That's why if you look at the slide here, we maintain all of the requirements are built in, because a lot of times for funding reasons or other reasons, we need to have a full definition of what it is we're going to do. So we still honor doing all of the requirements, but now we can break that up and say, let's design a little bit of it and get started on the development of that, and then continue to design a little bit more, get out in front of the next development phase. And so that's the benefit of working on the smaller pieces. So it does allow for greater flexibility. If the business needs to pivot and we've done the highest priority work, now we can release the highest priority work, and we don't incur the cost of delay related to holding code that's done, but we can't release it because there's dependencies on more work to be done. So the overall risk profile of the project goes down because we're working on smaller pieces, and then it increases stakeholder satisfaction because they have the opportunity to look at some of that working software along the way before we get, say, 100% done with development. That can be a long time where people have to have a big appetite for waiting for us to go from 50% to 60% to 70% to complete to production. And so it just allows us to some greater flexibility, ultimately. Okay.
All right, let's move to setting 2-week goals. So 2-week goals help align teams that are working on our projects to a common mission. So they combine the strategy with the execution. So there's many benefits to committing to a goal. So it helps to improve employee performance and build a sense of togetherness and increases motivation. It enhances the individual and overall team engagement, increases ownership and commitment, and ultimately increases success across the board. So have you ever noticed that when we set goals, let's talk about Fitbit users. If Fitbit users have a goal of 10,000 steps, do you know they're 43% more likely to take 43% more steps than those people that don't have a goal. So goal setting, even in small bits, is hugely impactful. 43% more steps.
Yeah.
So
I like the quote that's on the bottom there. It says, unless we have a purpose, there is no reason why individuals should try to cooperate together at all, or why anyone should try to organize them. So a couple things that we want to provide on goals is include the teams in the setting of the goals, okay? Because when you want to get some of these benefits where it talks about increased engagement or increased understanding of what it is we're trying to accomplish just in the next 2 weeks, the more that they can participate in that and understand that, then the more likely it is that they're going to get behind it. It's easier for me to get behind something of a fixed time frame. I know that in the next 2 weeks we're trying to accomplish this. And this will lend itself to some of the other things we're going to talk about, but you can see how an input to this could be that feature breakdown or that incremental milestone. Because now, when you are leading a team and you're starting to describe what it is we're doing and you're trying to align them on a common mission, you can do that in kind of a rolling wave fashion. Here's what we're trying to do over the next 3 months or the next 12 months, but here's what we're trying to do over the next 2 weeks. And it will help drive behaviors around the work differently. So goal setting in and of itself has tremendous benefit. So if you're looking for a format, you guys should be familiar, I hope, maybe you are, with being smart about goal setting. So SMART is typically one way where organizations will do like annual objectives for people and things of that nature. But SMART is to say be very specific, and this is the specificity we're going for should be inclusive of the teams participating. I just really want to reinforce that because you don't want to be handed a SMART goal and say, go do this. It doesn't feel the same as to say, let's work together to define a goal. There becomes an opportunity to start to bring people together. Make sure it's measurable. We want to know that we hit the goal, okay? Make sure that it's attainable. We don't want to set a goal that is, the goal, the teams, you hand this team to the goal to the team and they say, well, this is like 6 weeks worth of work you're trying to do in 2 weeks, right? That kind of disconnect is not what we want to do. So we want to make them attainable, but we want to make them at least challenging enough that it drives some more of that behavior that we want to drive in terms of getting people to really strive to accomplish that goal, okay? And then make them relevant. Like I said, you can have an overarching goal of what we're trying to do over the next 6 months or 12 months, whatever it is, but here's what we're trying to do over the 2 weeks related to this other thing that we're trying to accomplish. And then the time-bound element. 2 weeks is the time-bound element. So one more thing I wanted to talk about, goal setting. And I'm not getting it. So one more thing we wanted to add around goal setting. It's about attainable. It'll come to me. But anyway, this is a format that you can use to help your teams rally around that work. So, okay. Let's move on to visualizing work with a task board.
All right, so visualizing work with a task board, there's many benefits to visualizing your work. So here's a few. Allowing highest priority work to be closely managed. So we've talked about the prioritization of the feature list, so we can closely manage that and understand at what point it is in the process. Provides clear visibility on the status of each task that we've identified. Impacts of changing priorities are more easily determined. Keeps risks and milestones visible. Increase productivity and efficiency of the team because they are able to see what we've committed to instead of something big from a requirements document standpoint. And then increase team member focus. So here's an example up here. You can see across the top that there's different users per se, but the green is the flow. What are the process steps that we go through? The blue are each one of those things that we're going to do from a task standpoint. And what we do is we read it from left to right. So we start with to do, move each piece as it goes through the process, and eventually we'll get it to done. So
the other thing you can do on this is these horizontal lines here on a traditional like Kanban board, those would be classes of service, meaning something has a higher priority than another. You can give it its own swim lane. But in other cases, in order when you think about project delivery, It can be a swim lane for just to look at dependencies, and a swim lane just to look at risks, a swim lane just to look at the features that we're trying to deliver.
Yeah.
So
And,
that-
and we've had experience where if we're even working across projects, we talked about a matrix team, we can look at each project from a swim lane standpoint or the things that they're trying to do. And then as we have our meetings, we can look at this board even to start to articulate where we are with the things that we need to do, whether it's from our 2-week goal or from the whole roadmap of the project.
Yeah. And if
So-
you happen to have, I'm sorry, if you happen to have a distributed team and you need to use a tool for this, there's plenty of tools for it. But if you happen to be leading the project, I still encourage you to make a physical board. There's something about interacting with a physical board. I did this, even just if I had my individual team. I did this because I liked having a place for either my entire team or the core team to be able to meet and huddle around this board and watch our work flow across the board. And the team's ability, and I would have teams that would say, you know what, it's, like, we're technologists, we don't need to mess with paper. We could use a tool for this. And I would say, okay, you go try a tool. And sure enough, they'd come back, and because of the majority of the team liked interacting with the physical nature of the board, we would go back to a physical board, which I personally preferred. So.
Yep. All right, so how do you set up a task board? The easiest way is just to map out the steps of your workflow initially. So do we start from requirements or to do and go to development or design or code review, testing, so on? You put those across the top. And again, the flow is left to right, so you want to start your to-do or the things that haven't been started to the left, and the furthest to you would be done or completed. So this oftentimes will not shake out in the perfect way the very first time, so you can learn and make modifications as you go. Over specificity starts to get a little peculiar sometimes, so that would be an opportunity that if you feel like there's too many phases, if you will, across the top, that you make some adjustments. But you can see in this example right here, they have many different things, and A is at the done column, which means that's the highest priority, and so we would work on that first and move that through the workflow first. And then if you would start to encounter different things like blockers or impediments or things that are open, you can tag each one of those items as well with an indicator so that you know that there's a focus there. But this helps to let everybody understand where the pieces are, and even teams, they're able to visualize and understand the things that they need to do. So it helps to enable flow and an understanding and a common language to exactly where everything is at.
Yep. And so 3 things you hear in Agile frequently that we're trying to resolve or implement or correct in an environment is transparency and alignment. This brings that transparency and alignment to the work that we're trying to do. So that's why I think a visible task board is important.
This might help mitigate some of the status reporting as well in terms of, we've had that experience where when we had a board, anybody could just walk by and see, or they could access electronically and see, then some of that status reporting started to be less of time
Right.
commitment.
In some environments, not all. In some.
That's right.
But it can happen. We did that. So, okay, that was setting up a task board. So you can start to see how these things start to tie together. We broke our work down into a set of features. Now we're setting 2-week goals. So if you have 2-week goals as reflected on your task board, or you can start to see how these build on one another and how together they are what will help to improve flow. Okay. Okay, so holding the daily stand-up meeting. Okay, so the daily stand-up meeting. So we recognize that many of you may work on larger programs, large initiatives with lots of teams. So this may require you to have individual teams do this, as well as you, if you will, that's maybe running a project, do this with some of the core members of those teams, okay? The benefit of the daily stand-up is that it allows you to get feedback daily around progress that we're making and any impediments that we have. So you can see the 3 questions on the bottom here. We want each attendee to answer the following questions. What progress have you made toward our goal? Okay. What are your plans for today? And what's blocking you? We want everybody to have that level of clarity each and every day. And that's what, so now if you have, let's say you have a project that has 10 teams supporting it. Coordinate for somebody on each of those teams to run this at the individual team level, and then you can have the members that led that meeting, that daily stand-up for individual teams, meet with you, if you happen to be the one responsible for delivering it, to have a meeting with all of them to kind of get a roll-up of how things went at the individual team level. This also helps the team to maintain accountability to one another in terms of how we're working toward our goal, okay? A couple things about this. Actually stand up. It's a daily stand-up meeting. That's why we call it a stand-up. If you stand up, it'll keep the meeting short. These meetings are meant to be about 15 minutes in length. They are focused only on answering the 3 questions and identifying problems. They're not intended to solve problems, meaning you don't want to deep dive the whatever the problem is there. You take it away, you prioritize it, and you bring the right people together to solve the problem at some point. But this will allow you to have a daily view into anything that's blocking each individual, and it allows each individual to self-report on what's impacting them. So that's the daily stand-up meeting. It does foster good teamwork and transparency as well. People start to look forward to the daily stand-up meeting as the place to start their day, for example, and be able to start to interact with their team and report on challenges that they might be having so that they can be addressed and escalated. This also helps you to be able to foster from a transparency standpoint. Sometimes teams will be struggling, or an individual will be struggling trying to solve a problem, and without a forum for them to report it, they may burn more time than necessary for them to try to solve the problem themselves and and not report it for a while and end up losing valuable time. If this creates a forum for them to come together, report out what the challenges are, and you have to kind of foster it. Say, look, let's talk about what a problem could be. What is an impediment for us? Start with, it's anything that's slowing you down. Anything that's is preventing you from being able to work toward our 2-week goal, whatever that is. So if it's a technical problem or a technical challenge, or if it's a need for data, whatever it is, doesn't matter. We want to be able to raise it up and talk about it as a team and try to solve them. And this is an example on this slide where you see them standing around their task board as a way of kind of facilitating their daily stand-up meeting.
Yeah. Yep. So in that case, in the daily stand-up, you could actually do it one of 2 ways. You can do it based on person, or if you're looking at your task board, you can do it based on priority that we're talking about. So, the goal is to get things done, so we could start with those things that are in testing. Testing, how is this going, that kind of thing. Where are we at from a progress standpoint, and so on. So 2 different ways to do it. But here's some common anti-patterns that happen. So you can be aware of these because they will show up. Not having the daily stand-up daily, showing up late, people multitasking, not paying attention, people talking on mute. If you happen to be doing it via conference call, deep diving solutions in just this small amount of time that's just dedicated to understand progress, and then having way too many people in the meeting. So Larry gave a good option for that, holding separate ones and then having a point person come, and basically give their collective update, if you will, to you all, if you're running your project.
A couple other things to add to this. This tends to happen, so watch for it. We don't want to turn our daily stand-up meeting into a daily status meeting. It changes people's mindset in terms of how they engage in the meeting. Reporting status versus reporting progress and what's impacting me are 2 different things in people's mind. So if it becomes a status meeting, the way they'll interact will be different. Because I feel more accountable for being on the hook for giving actual status than I am for I'm reporting progress and what's impacting me toward that progress. So that's why we say daily stand-ups require discipline, because it's all too easy to turn it into a daily status meeting and it changes it dramatically. So watch out for that. Another way to bring health to your daily stand-up, I just made a mistake myself, to bring some health to your daily stand-up is to come up with a set of team working agreements for how we're going to do it. And have the team kind of self-define what are our team working agreements for our daily stand-up. Meaning, we're going to hold it every day. We're not going to multitask and be on our phone. We're going to show up on time. We're going to be prepared to give an update on our portion of the work that we're doing, and we're going to focus on moving toward our goal. So that's why we say the daily stand-up requires discipline.
Yeah, but that conversation in developing those team agreements should be a facilitated conversation, because if everybody agrees to something, then they're more likely to adhere to it, as opposed to being told, these are our team working agreements and you need to work like this, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. Okay, next item here is about presenting our features or demoing our features to our stakeholders.
All right, so we want to show off the great work that teams have done. So when a feature is complete, we want to have an opportunity to show it to our stakeholders. So we want to invite them to come in and review the work that we've done, whether it's 2 weeks or whatever the duration of that particular feature is. The acceptance criteria that we identified can let us know that we are done and we validated those things that the stakeholders are going to expect. So this helps to give us feedback loops, and the feedback helps to increase the confidence in the team that we're building the right things, and from your stakeholders knowing that the right things are being built. So presenting working tested features is going to just increase confidence overall in the project. Okay,
That's
so
right.
The Agile Manifesto even says working software is the primary measure of progress, and it's very true, because your stakeholders, if they start to see things are actually being built and coming to fruition, they're going to start to have trust in the project and understand that we're not going to get to day 12 months or 6 months and potentially not get the things that we really wanted, even though we may not have known how to articulate it in the right way to begin with.
That's right. So some best practices for the demo, like the daily stand-up, these demos have to be done right, okay? So here's some important things, okay? You want to prepare, but not over-prepare. In other words, the demo should be, like the next line says, about 30 to 60 minutes, right? If you're spending 8 hours preparing for this meeting, you're changing the dynamic of how we want the interaction of that meeting to be. So the demo is not meant to be where a stakeholder sits silent and is given kind of an update on it, and it's interactive, and so you would want to say that. This is meant to be an opportunity for us to discuss not only what was requested and what we defined as done. This is meant to be an opportunity for us to really directionally kind of give assurance to one another that we are doing this, we're heading in the right direction with this. So you have to kind of set the tone, for how that's going to work. Ensure your stakeholders are there. If they're dialed in remote, if that's the only option, then make that the best possible, arrangement that it can be. Have the team drive the demo. This is really, really important, and I'll tell you why. Because when you see the business and IT kind of, in their separate place, if you will, they don't have a real good idea on how the others think about the work that they're doing. So if the team is driving the demo and they've had to do some interesting things, because we're not in a production environment, so they've had to do some interesting things to facilitate that demo, they'll have a discussion right in front of the business, and that discussion will help the business go, wow, I didn't realize there was so much to do in order to be able to build what you're building. And it'll help them to rethink the idea of, why does it take so long? Now they'll start to understand, I'm calling a web service that's going to connect to this database, and it's going to do these things. It has to have this, this handshake of information. So it helps them to start to see firsthand some technical dialogue, technical discussion, real technical discussion, and it's helpful for them. And then on the other side of that, when the team is driving the demo and the business starts to give feedback on what they built, and they go, oh my gosh, customer so-and-so is going to be so thrilled about this. Now the team's going to go, wow, I didn't realize it was so important that, that customer is now going to be affected in such a positive way. So it starts to create a dynamic between the business and IT that has a lot of benefit to it, The other thing it does is, a lot of times business and IT will sit on different floors and they'll email and they'll know each other, via email and IM, but they get in the demo and they'll go, oh, I've been talking to you for 3 years. It sure is great to finally put a face to a name. So it really does help a lot.
Yeah, the other thing that we've seen that happens quite frequently is when team, like development and testing, when they start to really have conversations with the business and they start to really understand the customer, they can provide great innovative ideas about things that the business would never know that were possible. And so it helps to enhance the user experience, provide innovative ideas, and then other things that you can work on toward whatever you're delivering.
That's right. So make sure that we're demoing the solution. Whatever we have to do, if we're just not there yet because of environments or all these other things, then see what you have to do to get to the point where you're actually demoing and interacting with the system. Screenshots, documentation, PowerPoints, things of that nature, not the goal. Not the goal. That's why this is on a best practices slide. We want to demo working software. We want to encourage feedback and discussion and take the opportunity to give the team some kudos. It's good to build and prop up the team a little bit when you have that opportunity.
All right, so holding retrospective meetings every 2 weeks. So we've set our goal, and now we want to look and see if we're meeting our goal. And if we're not, what can we do to help facilitate that? Right? So we want to inspect and adapt at regular intervals. So what do we need to start doing? What should we stop doing that's happened since the last time we've had this retrospective? And what should we continue doing? And those 3 things are all important to, help build an understanding and help build our best chance at a good inspect and adapt process. So at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. So it's tag team? No. So instead of waiting, till the very end and having a lessons learned, let's learn the lessons now. Learn the lessons fast and figure out how we can start to incorporate those things so that we can help facilitate our goals and achieving our 2-week goals that we've set sooner rather than later.
Okay. So the retrospective and the 2-week goals go hand in hand, and you get into the daily stand-up in between that. Those 3 kind of ceremonies and those activities really start to change behavior around how the teams work together and interact. And this, by far and away is because throughout the course of the project, you have a nucleus that can hold the learning of what it is that we're trying to accomplish by way of the retrospective, okay? But retrospectives require diligence, just like the other ceremonies we talked about. So here's some common anti-patterns to watch out for. Number 1, not holding the retrospective on a regular cadence. So it's 2 weeks. 2 weeks, we want to learn. Every 2 weeks, we want to ask 3 simple questions. So if you don't hold it on a regular cadence, it starts to lose its value and people won't take it seriously. Not implementing changes that are identified in the retrospective, or not prioritizing them and coming up with a plan on how to implement them. That starts to devalue it. Leaders and managers do all the talking, and the team doesn't feel safe to speak up. Really, this is an opportunity for us to be working with the teams to understand things from their perspective as well. So we need to be able to create that safe environment. Sometimes it's a good idea to not have some of the leaders and managers who may be on the periphery using the retrospective as an opportunity to make the team feel like they're not doing the good enough job. And that's not the environment that we're trying to create. That's not the outcomes we're trying to accomplish. And so it's important to be cognizant of how does my team behave when certain people are participating in the meeting versus not participating in the meeting. If you see a dramatic difference, then you have to find out why, because people can have strong personalities and they can, teams can report something and they'll say, yeah, nothing we can do about that, and start to devalue it and it starts to erode the value. You also don't want to focus only on what's not working, right? That's why it's a start, stop, continue. What do we want to continue doing that is working, or what do we need to start doing differently? So all three questions have to be asked. And then the other thing to watch out for is we come together and we just report about the same problem every time, a persistent problem. If there's something that's being reported again and again and again, it's likely an outside the team issue. So we have inside the team challenges and outside the team challenges. The outside the team challenges, somebody should be understanding the impact of that, whatever that is, to us, and be able to determine how can I position this with somebody who can make a decision about it. If it takes 4 weeks to get a testing environment, for example, and that's a big challenge to the team, how did we land in a place where it takes us 4 weeks to procure an environment? What are the things that are driving that? Is there anything that we can do about it? Because here's the impact. So as an organization, when we've evolved to that point, we have to recognize the trade-offs that we're making, okay? So here's a summary.
Yep. Summary, finally, right? No, in this section, here are the things that we covered. So we started with a prioritized list of features and delivered those features incrementally. We set 2-week goals, visualized work with a board, task board, Kanban board, held daily stand-up meetings, we talked about that, presenting features to stakeholders, and then holding the retrospective meeting every 2 weeks.
So thank you again for the opportunity to be here today with you. A little bit about our organization, Agile training, coaching, consulting, and enterprise level transformation. We love what we do. We do a ton of teaching. If there's something you want to bring into your organization to explore or get good at, we would love to talk with you about it, talk about your goals. But that is it. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you.